What is up? So, after the video the other day about trades, I had a lot more thought go into some other names that probably should be traded, but I haven't seen any sort of news surrounding them. And they're the four guys you saw in the thumbnail, and thought we'd go look into those guys and why I think they should be traded, and kind of the reasons why they won't be. Most of that is surrounded by contracts, and especially, I mean, over the last several years, there's been a lot of talk about like bad contracts, and I think a lot of these guys fall within the bad contract category, which I think this year bad contracts aren't as prevalent as they have been, but the bad ones are looking even worse and are to the point where they're pretty immovable. Um, but hey, if you like the content and you've been enjoying what you've been seeing, just check out any other videos I've had and maybe hit the subscribe button down below. Then you can stay up to date with all my uploads. But anyways, first guy is Dylan Brooks. He signed a 3-year contract for $35 million a couple years ago, and he's got 1 year left with $11.4 million. That number is not too hard to trade, but I think the things that you get back aren't great. I did make a few fake trades, so then we can kind of look at some of these things. They're not great, but they're there as kind of like an idea. And then Dylan this season has been averaging 16.9 points per game, terrible efficiency, 39% from the field, 34% from three, which 34% is higher than I would expect. And then he basically turns the ball over once for every assist that he gets, which is pretty ugly. I don't think Dylan fits this team at all. I think I've said this before, like in the Grizzlies breakdown or prediction video. He needs to either be a shooter or just like some insane clamp defender that can do all the other little things, which he kind of does. But I mean, he's such a spaz that I think he's more of a negative than a positive for this team in a lot of ways. And I think the reason why he hasn't been extended again or is looked upon more positively on this team is because of all the downfalls and the negatives that he does bring onto the court. And so I don't expect him to be re-signed or stay here if he doesn't get traded. But I think he is one of the key guys that I think needs to be moved. The next guy is Duncan Robinson, and I'm sorry, Heat fans, there's two of your guys here. But Duncan signed a 5-year, $90 million contract, and he's being paid $16.9 this year, and then he's got 4 years left at $64.4 million, which at the time of that deal, it wasn't terrible because he was such a good shooter. He was shooting like 40-something% and was just coming off screens and nailing them, and now he's barely even playing. He's playing 17.6 minutes a game, scoring 6.3 points a game on 35% from the field and 30% from the three. I would pretty much assume that most of those points that he's getting are from three and maybe a layup here or there. This is the type of guy that like would be great on this team if he was shooting the ball well. I think for Duncan, he is going to be one of these guys that like when he does finally get moved, he'll look better in another situation and he might get some confidence back. I think the Heat just got to get off his money, and in any way they can, if they have to give up a second-round pick or something just to get some expiring deals, I think they should do that. It's just he's eating up too much salary on an aging roster that needs to try to compete right now. Next guy is Julius Randle. The Knicks have been not great, and I watched the Knicks-Warriors game the other night, and the Knicks just have too many of these guys that are like maybe shooters that just every time like they put up a shot, like they're looking at it like, oh, please go in, and none of them are ever like how Steph, he'll shoot it and turn around. Like he knows it's going in. None of these guys know that the ball is going in when they shoot it, and Julius is probably the worst example of this on the team. And he's a chucker too. Like he just launches them, and like his efficiency isn't the ugliest thing ever. But I think on a roster of, at this point, it's kind of split where there's a lot of younger guys and then there's like some of these vets. And it's interesting to see that Thibodeau has been changing his ways a little bit and has been playing some of these younger guys over some of the older guys because I think he's just at a loss. Like he needs to find some sort of spark somewhere. Like Cam Reddish has been in the starting lineup. He's been really good as far as like offensively and defensively. He's been shooting the ball well, getting like 2 steals a game or something. And I think there's like going to be this youth movement in New York where, I mean, these younger guys are finally starting to step up and looking a little bit better. But then, I mean, the elephant in the room is that RJ Barrett has been really bad too. I think just the move is to get younger and just hope that RJ can figure it out. And I think the move there is to get rid of Julius. But like Julius is averaging 20 points a game, 46 from the field, and 33 from three, getting 8 rebounds, 3 assists, and 3 turnovers. So he's turning the ball over every time he gets an assist, basically. And it's just he's just got to be better. Like when he got that contract, he's got to be at that level for him to be valuable to this team, I believe. And he's just not there right now. The last guy is Kyle Lowry, and Kyle Lowry, when he was traded to the Heat, it looked good for like a year. And it just, ever since then, it's just not been great. And looking back on things, like Kyle Lowry was never a crazy efficient scorer, but he did all the other things that like a team needed. Like he always played good defense. He was always taking charges. He was being like pesky as hell all the time to other teams. And at this point, with the Heat being so expensive and getting older, it's just, I don't see a reason why to keep this guy if you can move him. It's just not a great look right now with how old he is, and then how he's got like 2 years left, since he's making 28 this year and got 58 left on the books, because he's averaging basically 14 points. He's 39% from the field and 35% from three. And his assists aren't crazy high either, at 6 a game with 2.5 turnovers. So he's almost a 1-to-1 assist to turnover ratio as well, which isn't, or no, 1-to-2, which isn't great either. The Heat need to figure something out as far as maybe splitting some of these bigger contracts up into some more role players and having guys like Max Strus and these other guys step up a little bit more. I think that he's just another one of these guys for this team that needs to maybe find a different spot, and I think his career might fizzle out, which is sad to say because Kyle Lowry's great dude, great player, just not as much anymore. But let's take a look at these fake trades I have. I mean, again, like I said, I don't think that these are super realistic by any means, but they're kind of like the idea of where kind of the structure of what these trades might look like. So the first one, I looked right at the Grizzlies and the Heat because Dillon Brooks and Duncan Robinson, similar money, and kind of similar. I think the styles of these players would fit on the opposite team a little bit better. The rest of these guys are just there for money. It makes things tough. I mean, Danny Green's got that torn ACL or whatever, so they'd have to like accept an injured player being traded there. But I think Duncan going to the Grizzlies gives him an extra shooter. If he can find like his confidence back, because their defense is already pretty solid. And I think Dillon Brooks fits kind of like the Heat culture a little bit better than Duncan would, because Dillon could really just like fall into his role a little bit more and feel like he doesn't have to do quite as much. And I think he'd be a little bit more efficient of a player. And then again, like the Grizzlies wouldn't be super happy about taking on this giant contract by any means, but if he could be helpful to them, then maybe that's fine. And then the Heat, I mean, if they don't like Dillon Brooks, he's gone in a year. So I think that this is kind of the return some of these teams will get. Like the Heat are basically getting salary relief and maybe a good player. The Grizzlies are maybe getting someone that fits in. Again, I don't think that this would be accepted on the spot. This would maybe be a last-ditch effort. Another one for the Lakers is Duncan for Patrick Beverley and Kendrick Nunn. Again, salary relief. At this point, the Lakers need any type of shooting they can get and any sort of longer-term contract, because within the next few years, they'll have basically no one on the roster and no draft picks. So if they could revitalize Duncan Robinson in some way, that would be beneficial to them. Patrick Beverley is a decent shooter, but it takes him a long time. Like, he has to have a lot of space to be able to get his shots off. And I think adding Duncan would maybe be helpful. Again, not perfect, and both sides probably wouldn't love it. But again, Patrick Beverley would definitely fit the Heat culture a little bit, and maybe they are able to get rid of Kyle Lowry and have Patrick Beverley be their starter, and he'd fit really well. Now moving on, Kyle Lowry deal. This is, again, not wonderful. Maybe like John Wall isn't working out so hot for the Clippers, and so Kyle Lowry can kind of step in and fill that point guard role. And then Norman Powell's been pretty garbage for the Clippers this year, which is surprising because he's been really good over the last few years. And so, again, maybe like the Heat could revitalize him a little bit. And then Covington is kind of here for money. I really like Covington. I mean, he does everything you want a guy to do. He plays good defense and he shoots the ball well. I know over the last few years, it's kind of gone downhill a little bit for him. But I think both of these guys would kind of fit this Heat culture a little bit better. I would think in a deal like this, the Heat would probably need to give up a pick here, even though Kyle Lowry is a better player than either of these guys. I think that there'd be some picks exchanged, and maybe the Heat would want to pick for this deal since Norman Powell's contract is so ugly. But again, these are tough, and like this is where I've been getting at this whole time is that these guys make a lot of money at this point, and a lot of these guys are either older or don't fit super well, and a lot of these contending teams don't have contracts that they really want to get rid of unless they're a fairly good player and they want to get good value back, and that's hard to get when a guy's not looking great for your team right now and is on a big deal. Another Knicks one for Julius Randle. This one, I don't know. Like, Julius is going to be a hard player to move, but I thought maybe a deal like this would maybe help both sides. So the Knicks, I would assume, would have Ben Simmons play more like center, kind of like the same stuff he's doing for the Nets. He'd handle the ball a good bit, but then also, like, play some center, some power forward. And then the Nets, like, they basically got KD and Kyrie doing like almost all the scoring, and I think Nick Claxton is their third leading scorer. And so adding Julius Randle, who can give them a little bit more scoring punch, would be pretty helpful to them. And I think with a team with that much more spacing, Julius could actually kind of get back to his old self. And then Evan Fournier hasn't really played this season because he's been so bad. But again, I don't know who needs to give up a pick here because Ben has been really bad, Julius hasn't been great, and Evan Fournier has been bad with a bad contract. And so another one that's just really difficult. But I could see a world where this helps both sides. And the last one here, this one's probably the one that I like the most. Again, this is the same thing as the other video. Bogdan, December 15th, could be traded. Or Bojan. Make that mistake every time. But for the Pistons, salary relief and getting Golden State's first-round pick. I don't think the Grizzlies would want to give up their own pick. Maybe they would, actually. Now I'm thinking a little bit more about it because Golden State in 2024, maybe Draymond's even worse, maybe Clay's even worse, and this pick might be way more valuable than the Grizzlies since they're still getting even better each year. But regardless, I think Bojan on the Grizzlies would be crazy good because he could slot into like the 3 or the 4 spot and would just give them another crazy good shooter. I mean, having Desmond Bane and Jaren Jackson Jr. and Bojan all in the same lineup shooting threes would be crazy good offense around Ja Morant. And I think that would open up more lineups with Jaren Jackson Jr. at the center spot. So I think that this type of move for the Grizzlies would be something really good to look at. And then the Pistons, I mean, I liked the idea of signing Bojan to like a longer deal because I think that just what they're doing is, I mean, they're giving their young guys a good player to kind of help keep the offense steady and like having a good scorer, a good shooter. But then also, since he's like so good at what he does, he's just incredible trade bait. And I don't think people would give up as much if he was on a 1-year deal like he was originally instead of this new extension that he got. And so I think that teams would be more likely to give up more for him. And so I think that could really help the Grizzlies and the Pistons if they can get a pick or even more than that, maybe a young player too. This would be really good. But anyways, I mean, the issue with all these guys is the contract, and these winning teams right now, they don't have the deals or the salaries that they can get off of in order to like take some of these larger contracts. So I think these are going to be difficult to pull off if any of these teams are able to trade these guys. I think that would be great. I think that it would help all of these teams to move off of these guys. It's just a matter of if they can pull it off. And I think the trade deadline this year is probably going to be a very stale one. Basically, around that, I think most of the deals are going to be on the fringes, the outside guys that barely play. Um, but again, thanks again for listening. If you stuck around this long, you're the best. And I'll see you in the next one. So take care.